I stood in front of the full-length mirror, still wearing my wedding dress, and watched mascara-stained tears roll down my cheeks. 3 hours ago, I was the happiest woman alive. Now I felt like I was drowning in white tulle and broken promises. My name is Sophia, and this was supposed to be the most romantic night of my life. Instead, I'm locked in the bathroom of our honeymoon suite, trying to process the words my new husband just spoke. I'm in love with your sister. The words keep echoing in my head, each repetition feeling like a fresh slap across my face. Jeremy had been drinking. Not enough to be drunk, just enough to loosen his tongue. We'd barely made it through the door of our suite when he dropped this bomb. Sophia? Jeremy's voice came through the door, accompanied by soft knocking. Baby, please come out. We need to talk about this. How long? I managed to choke out, loud enough for him to hear. A pause. What? How long have you been in love with Shiloh? Another pause, longer this time. Since before the engagement. The sob that escaped my throat didn't sound human. I thought about Shiloh's face at the wedding, how she'd hugged me so tightly before the ceremony, telling me how happy she was for me. Had she known? Have you been sleeping with her? No. God, no, Sophia. I would never. But you're in love with her? I cut him off, my voice stronger now. Anger was beginning to replace the shock. I tried to fight it. I thought getting married would help me forget about her. I yanked the door open so hard it slammed against the wall. Jeremy stumbled back, his bow tie hanging loose around his neck, his wedding suit wrinkled. You thought getting married would help you forget about my sister? The words came out as a hiss. You used me as therapy? That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean, Jeremy? Please enlighten me about how marrying me was supposed to cure your feelings for my little sister. He reached for me, but I stepped back. Don't touch me. Don't you dare touch me. Sophia, please. We can work through this. We can get counseling. I laughed, and it sounded hollow even to my own ears. Counseling? You just told me you've been in love with my sister since before you proposed to me. There's nothing to work through. My hands were steady as I reached up to remove my veil. The diamond ring on my finger caught the light, and suddenly I couldn't bear to look at it. I pulled it off and placed it on the marble counter. Sophia. I'm calling Mara to pick me up, I said, reaching for my phone. And tomorrow I'm calling a lawyer. Don't do this, Jeremy pleaded. Think about what people will say. A divorce after one day? Oh, now you care about what people will say? I spun around to face him. Did you care about what people would say when you walked me down the aisle, knowing you were in love with my sister? His face crumpled. I never meant to hurt you. But you did. And you hurt Shiloh too, whether you realize it or not. I typed out a quick message to Mara, my hands still surprisingly steady. You've ruined everything. Not just our marriage, but my relationship with my sister, our family's friendships. We can fix this. No, we can't. I grabbed my overnight bag, thankful I hadn't unpacked yet. But I can fix myself. And I will. I changed out of my wedding dress in the bathroom, putting on jeans and a sweater. As I folded the dress into its garment bag, I caught my reflection again. My makeup was ruined, but my eyes were clear now. I'll have my lawyer contact you, I said, walking past Jeremy toward the door. Don't try to contact me or Shiloh. Sophia, please don't go. I paused at the door, my hand on the handle. You know what the worst part is? I actually thought I was the lucky one. I thought I had found true love while Shiloh was still searching. Turns out I was just a placeholder. Before he could respond, I walked out, closing the door softly behind me. In the elevator, I pulled out the divorce papers I'd had drawn up last week, a precaution my intuition had insisted upon, even as I'd told myself I was being paranoid. When I returned to the room an hour later to leave them on the bed beside his sleeping form, I felt nothing but a cold determination. Tomorrow, the real work would begin, the work of rebuilding myself from the ground up. But tonight, as I watched Jeremy's chest rise and fall in peaceful sleep, I made myself a promise. This would be the last time anyone ever made me feel this small. 3 months after my one-day marriage, I sat across from Mara at our favorite coffee shop, stirring my untouched latte. The divorce was final. Money talks, and I'd paid extra to expedite everything. "You need to eat something," Mara said, pushing a croissant toward me. "You've lost too much weight." "I'm fine." I took a small bite to appease her. "Besides, I'm too busy to worry about food. The expansion plans? The expansion plans can wait 5 minutes while you have breakfast with your best friend." Mara reached across the table and grabbed my hand. "Talk to me, Sophia. Really talk to me." I set down my spoon. "I saw Shiloh yesterday, at the grocery store." "Oh God, what happened?" "Nothing. She saw me, I saw her, and we both pretended we didn't exist." I laughed bitterly. Funny how someone can go from being your closest confidant to a stranger in the produce aisle. "Have you told your parents about the real reason for the divorce?" I shook my head. "What's the point? They're already devastated enough. Besides, it would only make things worse for everyone." The bell above the cafe door chimed, and I looked up reflexively. My heart skipped a beat when I saw who had walked in. "Is that Drew?" Mara whispered, following my gaze. "Drew from college?" It was indeed Drew, looking even better than he had in our university days. He caught my eye and did a double take, then broke into a warm smile. "Sophia?" He walked over to our table. "I thought that was you." "Drew, hi." I stood up, accepting his quick hug. "It's been what, 5 years?" "At least." He glanced at the empty chair at our table. "Mind if I join you?" Mara kicked me under the table. "Actually, I was just leaving. Early meeting." She gathered her things with suspicious speed. "Drew, it was great seeing you again." After Mara left, Drew took her seat. "I heard about the divorce, I'm sorry." "News travels fast," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "Small business community." He shrugged. "I've been meaning to reach out, actually. I heard you're expanding your consulting firm?" "Trying to. The market's tough right now. I might have an opportunity for you." He pulled out his business card. "My company's looking for a strategic partner in digital transformation. Would you be interested in pitching?" Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. A text from Trisha, my mentor. "Need to see you ASAP. Important opportunity." "I'd love to hear more," I told Drew, tucking his card into my wallet. "But I have to run. Meeting with my mentor." "Have dinner with me tonight," he said. "We can discuss business and catch up properly." I hesitated only briefly. "Okay, text me the details." 20 minutes later, I walked into Trisha's office. She was on the phone but waved me in. "Perfect timing," she said after hanging up. "You'll never guess who just called me about you." "Who?" "Owen Johnson, Jeremy's business partner." My stomach clenched. "What did he want?" "To hire you. Apparently, their firm is struggling with some major digital infrastructure issues. They need someone who understands both technology and business strategy." "No." I stood up. "Absolutely not." "Sophia, wait." Trisha held up her hand. "I know your history with Jeremy, but this could be huge for your firm. Owen specifically requested you because of your reputation." "My reputation?" I laughed. "You mean the woman who couldn't keep her husband for 24 hours? "No," Trisha said firmly. "The woman who turned a small consulting practice into one of the most respected firms in the city in less than 3 years. The woman who just won the Innovation in Business Award." I sank back into my chair. "I can't work with Jeremy." "You wouldn't have to. Owen would be your point of contact." She leaned forward. "Sometimes the best revenge is success, Sophia. And sometimes opportunity comes disguised as something we want to run from." My phone buzzed again. A text from Drew with restaurant details for tonight. "I need to think about it," I told Trisha. "Of course." She smiled knowingly. "But don't think too long. Opportunities like this don't come around often." As I left her office, another text came through, this one from an unknown number. It was Shiloh. "We need to talk, please." I deleted the message without responding and pulled out Drew's business card instead. Maybe Trisha was right. Maybe the best revenge wasn't plotting and scheming, but simply becoming so successful that those who hurt you become irrelevant. I typed out a quick response to Drew, confirming dinner. Whatever Owen's offer was, I had a feeling Drew's might be better, both professionally and personally. And right now, better was exactly what I needed. 6 months later, I sat in my newly expanded office watching the city lights flicker on as dusk settled. The merger with Drew's company had transformed both our businesses and our relationship. My phone buzzed with his message. "Still on for dinner? Have big news." Before I could reply, Kylie, my new business partner, burst into my office. "Sophia, you need to see this." She thrust her tablet at me. On the screen was a local business news article. "Tech firm faces investigation amid financial irregularities." The photo showed Jeremy and Owen leaving their office building, faces grim. "Karma's a beautiful thing," Kylie said, perching on my desk. "I had nothing to do with this," I replied, scanning the article. "No one said you did, but you have to admit the timing is perfect. Your company's soaring while theirs is crashing." My phone buzzed again, this time with a call from Mara. "You're not going to believe what I just heard," she said when I answered. "Shiloh lost her job at the magazine. Apparently, she's been showing up late, missing deadlines." "That's not my problem," I said, but something in my chest tightened. "There's more. She and Jeremy have been fighting publicly. Last week at Riverside Restaurant, they caused such a scene that management had to ask them to leave." I ended the call quickly, not wanting to hear more. Success was supposed to make me feel better, not worse. My sister's downfall shouldn't matter to me anymore. "Sophia?" Drew appeared in my doorway, looking sharp in his business suit. "Ready for dinner?" During dinner at our favorite Italian restaurant, Drew couldn't contain his excitement. "The Silicon Valley deal is happening. They want both our companies involved in the expansion." "That's incredible," I said, reaching for his hand across the table. "When do they want to start?" "That's the thing. They want us in California next week for preliminary meetings." He squeezed my hand. "I was thinking maybe we could extend the trip, make it personal as well as professional." Before I could respond, a commotion erupted near the entrance. I turned to see Owen arguing with the maitre d'. "I need to speak with Sophia," Owen was saying, his voice carrying across the restaurant. "It's urgent." Drew started to stand, but I placed a hand on his arm. "I'll handle this." I approached Owen, who looked disheveled. Nothing like the polished businessman I remembered. "Whatever this is, it can wait until business hours." "Jeremy's going to lose everything," Owen said, his voice desperate. "The investigation. We need your help, Sophia. Your expertise could save the company." "My expertise?" I laughed coldly. "The same expertise Jeremy dismissed when we were married? When he said my success was just luck?" "People make mistakes. He knows that now." "Yes, they do. And now he's making more of them." I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "Tell Jeremy that karma doesn't need my help. It's doing just fine on its own." As I turned to walk away, Owen grabbed my arm. "Shiloh's pregnant." The words hit me like a physical blow. I pulled my arm free, aware of Drew watching from our table. "Congratulations to them both," I said, my voice steady despite the roaring in my ears. "Now leave before I call security." Back at the table, Drew didn't ask questions. He just poured more wine and said, "About that California trip?" "Yes," I said, surprising both of us. "Let's extend it. I think I need a change of scenery." Later that night in my apartment, I found myself looking at old photos of Shiloh and me as kids. My phone lit up with a text from an unknown number, Jeremy this time. "Please help us, for Shiloh's sake." I blocked the number and opened my laptop instead. The business news was full of speculation about Jeremy and Owen's company. According to inside sources, the investigation was just the tip of the iceberg. My phone rang again. Kylie this time. "Sophia, you won't believe who just reached out to our HR department about a job." Owen's wife. She says she has dirt on both Owen and Jeremy that could help us land their biggest clients. I closed my eyes, thinking about the baby Shiloh was carrying, my niece or nephew. Then I thought about the night Jeremy confessed his love for her, about all the nights I'd cried myself to sleep afterward. Tell HR to set up the interview, I said finally. But make it clear, we're not interested in dirt. We win clients through excellence, not exploitation. After hanging up, I packed my bag for California. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying your enemies. It's about building yourself up so high they can't reach you anymore. And right now, with Drew by my side and my business thriving, I was soaring. The California sun streamed through the conference room windows as I wrapped up my presentation. The Silicon Valley executives were nodding, clearly impressed. Drew squeezed my hand under the table as the CEO stood up. Outstanding, Sophia. We'd like to move forward immediately. Back in our hotel room, Drew popped champagne while I kicked off my heels. You were amazing in there, he said, handing me a glass. My phone buzzed. Kylie's name flashing on the screen. Sophia, turn on the business news. Now. Drew grabbed the remote and suddenly Jeremy's face filled the screen. He looked haggard, standing outside his office building, surrounded by reporters. Allegations of fraud and embezzlement. Mr. Johnson has been taken into custody, and sources say more arrests are pending. Holy shit, Drew whispered. My phone exploded with notifications. Mara, are you watching this? Trisha, call me ASAP. And then a text from my mother. Shiloh's in the hospital. Please come home. I have to go back, I told Drew, already packing my suitcase. I'll come with you. No, stay. Finish the deal. I kissed him quickly. I'll handle this. 6 hours later, I walked into the hospital waiting room. My mother rushed to hug me, her face tear-stained. She's asking for you. What happened? The stress. The baby. She couldn't finish the sentence. I found Shiloh in a private room, curled on her side, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. When she saw me, her eyes filled with tears. I lost the baby, she whispered. I stood frozen in the doorway, all my carefully constructed walls crumbling. I'm sorry. Jeremy's being arrested tomorrow. She wiped her eyes. He knew what Owen was doing. He helped cover it up. Why are you telling me this? Because I need my sister back. Her voice broke. I know we can never go back to how things were, but I miss you so much it hurts. I sat on the edge of her bed, maintaining distance. You broke my heart, Shiloh. Both of you did. I know, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. She reached for my hand. But you're the strong one. You always have been. I need your strength now. Before I could respond, my phone rang. Kylie again. Owen's wife just left the interview. Sophia, they were running a Ponzi scheme. Jeremy and Owen were using client funds to cover personal debts. It's worse than anyone thought. I ended the call and looked at my sister. Did you know? She shook her head. I suspected something was wrong, but Jeremy wouldn't tell me anything. He just kept getting more paranoid, more controlling. A nurse appeared with discharge papers. Shiloh's hands shook as she tried to sign them. Where are you going to go? I asked. Mom and Dad's, I guess. I can't go home. Reporters are everywhere. I heard Trisha's voice in my head. Sometimes the best revenge is rising above. I took a deep breath. Come stay with me. Shiloh's head snapped up. What? Not forever, just until you figure things out. I took the papers from her trembling hands and signed where indicated. But we need to be clear, this doesn't fix everything. I know. Back at my apartment, I made up the guest room while Shiloh showered. My phone rang. Drew. The deal's done, he said. How are you holding up? I don't know. I sank onto my couch. Drew, I let Shiloh stay with me. A pause. Are you sure that's wise? No, but she's still my sister. And that's why I love you, he said softly. It was the first time he'd said those words. Before I could respond, breaking news alerts flooded my phone. Jeremy had been arrested trying to flee the country. The company was declaring bankruptcy. Thousands of clients' savings were gone. Shiloh emerged from the guest room wearing borrowed pajamas. "I saw the news," she said quietly. "I keep thinking about what you said at the wedding, about being the lucky one. I was so stupid, Sophia. I threw away the best sister in the world for a man who turned out to be a criminal." I looked at her, really looked at her. The designer clothes and perfect makeup were gone. She was just my little sister again, lost and broken. "We can't go back," I said finally. "But maybe we can go forward." My phone buzzed with another message from Drew. "Coming home tomorrow. We'll figure this out together." Looking at my sister's tear-stained face, I realized something important. True revenge isn't about watching your enemies fall. It's about being strong enough to stay standing when they do. And sometimes it's about being strong enough to help others stand back up, even when they've hurt you. 2 weeks after Shiloh moved in, I stood in my kitchen watching her attempt to make breakfast. The smell of burning toast filled the air. "I'm sorry," she said, dumping another blackened slice into the trash. "I never had to cook before." "That's because you always had someone doing everything for you," I replied, then immediately regretted my tone when I saw her face fall. The doorbell rang, saving us from the awkward moment. It was Drew, carrying coffee and proper breakfast from our favorite cafe. "My hero," I said, kissing him hello. "I figured you two could use a real breakfast," he said, setting down the bags. "Especially today." Today, Jeremy's arraignment. Shiloh's hands trembled as she reached for a coffee cup. "You don't have to go," I told her. "Yes, I do." She straightened her shoulders. "I need to see it for myself." My phone buzzed. Mara was calling. "Turn on the news. You've been nominated for Businesswoman of the Year." Drew had already grabbed the remote. There I was on screen, my professional headshot next to the award logo. The announcer was talking about my company's meteoric rise and innovative approach to digital transformation. "Sophia," Shiloh whispered, "that's amazing." Before I could respond, my mother burst through the door. She still had a key from checking on my plants. "Have you seen the news?" she demanded, then stopped short seeing us all in the kitchen. "Oh, you're having breakfast together." "Mom," Shiloh started, but our mother cut her off. "I don't understand how you can sit here playing happy families when your husband is being arraigned for fraud today." "Ex-husband," I corrected automatically. "And whose fault is that?" Mom snapped. "If you hadn't rushed into divorce?" "That's enough," Drew said firmly, stepping forward. "Sophia's nomination is a huge achievement. That's what we're celebrating today." Mom's face crumpled. "Everything's falling apart. The neighbors won't stop talking. Your father can't sleep. And now you're getting awards while your sister's life is in shambles." "Actually," Shiloh spoke up, her voice stronger than I'd heard in weeks. "Sophia's helping me put my life back together, which is more than I deserve after what I did." The room fell silent. It was the first time Shiloh had acknowledged her role in everything in front of our mother. "What you did?" Mom looked confused. "What do you mean?" "Mom," I warned, but Shiloh shook her head. "She needs to know." Shiloh took a deep breath. "Jeremy was in love with me before he married Sophia. That's why their marriage ended." Mom sank into a kitchen chair. "What?" "And Shiloh's voice cracked. "I loved him too. We betrayed Sophia in the worst possible way. The silence that followed was deafening." My mother looked between us, her face going through a range of emotions. "The arraignment starts in an hour," Drew said quietly. "We should get going." The courthouse was packed with reporters. As we walked in, I heard whispers. "That's his ex-wife. And her sister. The one he left her for." Shiloh gripped my arm. "I can't do this." "Yes, you can." I surprised myself by taking her hand. "We both can." Jeremy looked small in his orange jumpsuit. When he saw us enter, his eyes locked on Shiloh, then darted to me. I stared back, feeling nothing but pity. The charges were read: fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy. Jeremy pleaded not guilty, but his voice shook. As they led him away, he called out, "Shiloh, please." She started to step forward, but I held her back. "Don't." "But he's drowning, Shiloh. Don't let him drag you down with him." Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed us. "Sophia, how does it feel to see your ex-husband facing prison?" "Shiloh, are you still in a relationship with the defendant?" Drew pushed through them, creating a path. Ms. Foster has no comment except to say she's honored to be nominated for Businesswoman of the Year. Her focus remains on growing her successful company and contributing to the business community. Back at my apartment, Shiloh collapsed onto the couch. "I can't believe this is my life now." "It doesn't have to be," I said, sitting beside her. "You're smart, Shiloh. You can rebuild just like I did." "How can you even want to help me after everything?" "Because watching you suffer doesn't make me feel better. Being successful does." I handed her my laptop. "I have a junior position opening up in my company. The pay's not great, but it's a start." She stared at me, then at Drew, who nodded encouragingly. "Why?" she whispered. "Because karma's done its job," I said. "Now it's time for grace." Drew wrapped his arm around me as Shiloh began to cry. Outside, camera flashes still lit up the street, but in here, in this moment, something broken was slowly beginning to heal. The boardroom fell silent as I finished presenting our quarterly results. Shiloh sat in the back, taking notes. She'd been with the company for 3 months now, starting at the bottom just like everyone else. "Impressive numbers," said Marcus, our biggest investor. "The Businesswoman of the Year nomination is well-deserved." As people filed out, Kylie rushed in. "Sophia, there's something you need to see." She pulled up an email on her tablet. "Owen's wife sent this. It's proof that Jeremy was planning to steal company assets even before your wedding." My hands gripped the edge of the table. "Why is she sending this now?" "Jeremy's trying to cut a deal with prosecutors. She's afraid he'll pin everything on Owen." Shiloh appeared at my side, her face pale. "There's more," she said quietly. "Jeremy's been writing me letters from jail. This morning, he sent one saying he has evidence that could hurt you." "What evidence?" Drew asked, walking in. "He's bluffing." "I don't know," Shiloh replied. "But he's desperate. The preliminary hearing is tomorrow." My phone buzzed. "Mara. Turn on the news now." Kylie already had it streaming on the boardroom screen. Owen stood outside the courthouse, microphones thrust in his face. Evidence that Sophia Foster orchestrated this whole thing for revenge. She planted false information, manipulated records. "That's ridiculous," Drew snapped. "We have to respond." "No," I said firmly. "We don't." "Sophia." Shiloh touched my arm. "I should testify. Tell them about the letters, about how Jeremy confessed everything to me." "Absolutely not." I turned to face her. "You've worked too hard to rebuild your life. I won't let you throw it away for this." "But..." "She's right," Drew said. "We handle this legally, through proper channels." Trisha burst into the room. "Emergency board meeting in an hour. Owen's accusations are causing stock volatility." I straightened my jacket. "Then we better be ready." As everyone filed out to prepare, Shiloh stayed behind. "I need to show you something." She pulled out her phone, showing me a text from Jeremy. "Tell Sophia I'm sorry. For everything. But I can't go to prison." "He's going to do something stupid," she whispered. Before I could respond, Kylie rushed back in. "Sophia, reporters are in the lobby. Lots of them." "Use the back exit," Drew said, grabbing my briefcase. "I'll handle the press." In the parking garage, Shiloh and I hurried toward my car. A figure stepped out from behind a pillar, Jeremy's father. "Please," he said, his voice breaking. "Help my son." "Mr. Lawson," I started, but he cut me off. "He's sick, Sophia. He needs treatment, not prison. If you speak on his behalf..." "Your son committed fraud," I said firmly. "He stole people's life savings. That's not illness, that's choice." He loves you both so much, the old man pleaded, looking between Shiloh and me. It tore him apart. No, Shiloh stepped forward. He loved himself more than anyone. That's why we're all here. My phone rang. Trisha again. The board's waiting. Where are you? On my way. I turned to Jeremy's father. I'm sorry, but I can't help. Back in the boardroom, I faced the board with steady confidence. Owen's accusations are desperate attempts by a guilty man to create reasonable doubt. Our records are immaculate, our practices transparent. And what about the personal angle? One board member asked. The revenge narrative? My personal history with Jeremy is well documented, I replied, as is my company's success. One has nothing to do with the other. My phone buzzed with a text from Drew. Jeremy just posted a video online. It's going viral. Kylie was already pulling it up on the screen. Jeremy's face appeared, haggard and desperate. I need to confess something, he said. Sophia isn't responsible for anything. I destroyed my own life. I betrayed the only woman who ever truly loved me, hurt her in the worst possible way, and then tried to blame her for my downfall. She's innocent. I'm the guilty one. In everything. The boardroom erupted in murmurs. Shiloh gripped my hand under the table. Well, Trisha said, standing up. I believe that settles it. Shall we proceed with business as usual? Later that night, in my office, Drew found me staring out the window. You okay? He asked, wrapping his arms around me. I thought revenge would feel better than this, I admitted, but watching everyone self-destruct, it just feels empty. That's because you're better than revenge, he said, turning me to face him. You built something real, something lasting. My phone lit up with a final text from Jeremy. I'm turning myself in tomorrow. No deals, no accusations, just the truth. I'm sorry for everything. I deleted the message without responding. Some chapters needed to stay closed. Come on, Drew said, taking my hand. Let's go home. The lights of the awards ceremony ballroom sparkled like stars as I adjusted my evening gown backstage. Drew straightened his bow tie beside me. Ready? He asked, offering his arm. Almost. I checked my phone one last time. A message from Shiloh. You've got this, sis. We're all in the audience cheering for you. The past month had been a whirlwind. Jeremy and Owen had both pleaded guilty, accepting plea deals that would put them behind bars for at least a decade. Their company had been dissolved, but we'd managed to save most of their employees' jobs by absorbing their legitimate contracts. Sophia? The event coordinator appeared. You're on in 5 minutes. Drew squeezed my hand. I have something to ask you before you go out there. Now? I raised an eyebrow. He dropped to one knee, pulling out a small velvet box. I was going to wait until after, but, Sophia, this past year has shown me what real strength looks like, what real love looks like. Will you marry me? Before I could answer, Mara burst through the curtain. Sophia, they need you on stage. Oh. She stopped short, seeing Drew on his knee. Yes, I said quickly, my heart racing. Yes, but we need to finish this conversation later. Drew slipped the ring on my finger just as the announcer's voice boomed. And now our Businesswoman of the Year. I walked onto the stage to thunderous applause. In the front row, I saw Shiloh sitting with our parents, all of them beaming. Mara and Kylie were there too, giving me thumbs up. And Drew, my new fiancé, standing in the wings with that proud smile. Thank you, I began, adjusting the microphone. A year ago, I thought my life was over. My marriage had imploded, my family was fractured, and my trust in people was shattered. The audience fell silent. But sometimes, what feels like an ending is really a beginning. Sometimes, the worst betrayal can lead to the greatest growth. I stand here not because I sought revenge, but because I chose to rise above it. Movement at the back of the hall caught my eye. Jeremy's father had slipped in, standing quietly by the door. Success isn't about watching others fail. It's about building something meaningful from the ashes of disappointment. It's about choosing grace when bitterness would be easier. Shiloh wiped tears from her eyes as our mother held her hand. This award isn't just mine. It belongs to every person who helped me rebuild. My incredible team, my supportive family, my... I glanced at Drew, my future husband, who just proposed backstage 5 minutes ago. The audience erupted in cheers and laughter. But most importantly, this award belongs to every person who's ever been betrayed, hurt, or knocked down. You can get back up. You can rebuild. You can succeed not despite your pain, but because of how it shaped you. As I accepted the award, my phone buzzed in my clutch. Later, I would see it was a message from Jeremy. Congratulations. You deserve every success. I'm sorry I couldn't see your worth when I had the chance. At the after party, Shiloh hugged me tight. That speech was incredible. I meant every word, I said, looking at her, including the part about grace. Sophia, our mother interrupted. Jeremy's father is here. He'd like to speak with you. I found him by the bar, looking older than I remembered. Congratulations, he said softly. Thank you for coming. Jeremy watched your speech. They streamed it at the facility. He twisted his hands together. He wanted you to know he's getting help. Real help this time. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. And, he continued, he hopes someday you'll both find it in your hearts to forgive him. Someday, I said carefully, but not today. Drew appeared at my side, protective as always. Everything okay? Yes, I said, turning to him. Everything's perfect. Later that night, as the party wound down, I found myself on the balcony with Shiloh. She was looking at the city lights, lost in thought. I got a job offer, she said suddenly. A good one, with a magazine in Chicago. Are you going to take it? I think I need to. Build my own life, like you did. She turned to me. Thank you, Sophia, for showing me how to be strong. You always were strong, I told her. You just forgot for a while. Drew joined us, wrapping his arm around my waist. Ready to go home? I looked at my sister, then at my fiancé, then at the glittering city below. A year ago, I thought revenge would heal me. Instead, I found healing and forgiveness. Not for those who hurt me, but for myself. Yes, I said, taking both their hands. Let's go home. The morning sun streamed through my office windows as I finished typing the last sentence of my memoir. Drew knocked softly before entering, carrying 2 cups of coffee. Still working on the book? He asked, setting my cup down. Just finished, actually. I closed my laptop. Just in time for Shiloh's flight. My sister was flying in from Chicago for the weekend. Her magazine had become one of the most successful digital publications in the Midwest. We'd rebuilt our relationship slowly, carefully, like setting a broken bone. Miss Foster? My assistant poked her head in. There's someone here to see you. Says it's important. Owen's wife stood in the reception area, clutching her purse. I'm sorry to come unannounced, she said, but Jeremy asked me to give you this. She held out an envelope. I don't want... Please, she interrupted. He's completed his rehabilitation program. He's different now. I took the envelope but didn't open it. How's Owen? Serving his time, she said quietly. Unlike Jeremy, he's still in denial about everything. After she left, Drew watched me stare at the envelope. You don't have to read it. Yes, I do. I opened it carefully. Inside was a handwritten letter. Dear Sophia, I'm not writing to ask forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm writing to thank you. Your success showed me what real strength looks like. Your grace showed me what real character looks like. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of having once been loved by someone like you. Jeremy. My phone buzzed. Shiloh had landed. Want me to pick her up? Drew offered. No, I need to do this. At the airport, Shiloh ran to hug me, looking healthy and confident. I have news, she said as we walked to my car. I met someone. Tell me everything. He's kind, honest, successful. She paused. And he knows everything about my past. About Jeremy, about what I did to you. He says our mistakes don't define us. He's right. I handed her Jeremy's letter. Read this when you're ready. Back at my office, I found Mara waiting with Kylie. The publisher called, Mara announced. They want to fast-track your book. They think it could help a lot of people. Speaking of helping people, Kylie added, the women's shelter loved your proposal. They want to partner with us on the business training program for abuse survivors. I looked around my office, at the Businesswoman of the Year award, at the photo of Drew and me at our engagement party, at the sister I'd almost lost but found again. Sophia? Drew appeared in the doorway. Your mother's here. Mom walked in, carrying a familiar-looking box. I found this in the attic, she said, setting it down. Your old journals from right after everything. I opened the box, finding the tear-stained pages I'd poured my heart into during those dark days. I was so angry then, I said softly. You had every right to be, Mom replied. But look what you built from that anger. Shiloh picked up one of the journals. We should include these in your book. Show people how far you've come. How far we've all come, I corrected. My phone lit up with a message from Trisha. Just heard Jeremy's getting released early for good behavior. You okay? I looked at Drew, who read the message over my shoulder. Whatever you need, he said quietly. I need to finish my book, I replied, opening my laptop again. People need to know that rock bottom can become a foundation. Shiloh read the final paragraph over my shoulder. Revenge is like holding on to a burning coal, hoping the other person feels the heat. True power comes from letting go, not because they deserve forgiveness, but because you deserve peace. My story isn't about the betrayal anymore. It's about what I built after the breaking. It's perfect, she whispered. Drew gathered everyone for dinner at our favorite restaurant, the same one where Owen had once begged for help. As we celebrated Shiloh's success and my book deal, I realized something profound. Happiness isn't about getting even. It's about getting better. To new beginnings, Drew proposed a toast. And to old wounds that became wisdom, I added. Shiloh raised her glass last. To sisters who became stronger than their scars. As we clinked glasses, I felt the weight of Jeremy's letter in my purse. Tomorrow, I would file it away with my old journals, not to forget, but to remember how far I'd come. Some chapters end in tragedy, others in triumph. Mine had ended in transformation, and that was the sweetest revenge of all.
On a Sunday morning, soft October sunlight filtered through the quiet residential streets of Edina. The red maple leaves swayed in the front yard, and a neighbor's dog's distant barking pleasantly broke the morning silence. Linda Morrison woke up at her usual time of 7 a.m. 2 hours until Sunday service. The morning sun streaming through the kitchen window cast a warm light on the new wooden counter. Birds had already started gathering at the garden feeder. Another lovely morning, Linda murmured softly as she turned on the coffee maker. The aroma of Caribou Coffee's house blend spread through the quiet kitchen. As she put on her pastel blue apron, she recalled the hymns for today's service. On the counter, a photo frame displayed their wedding picture from 8 years ago. Thomas, dressed in a white tuxedo, gazed at Linda with a happy smile. Next to it, his death certificate from last year sat unobtrusively. Sometimes the contrast made her heart ache, but Linda had overcome it through the power of faith. While brewing coffee, Linda vividly remembered their wedding day from 8 years ago. They first met at Christ Presbyterian Church 10 years ago while volunteering for Sunday school. Linda was captivated by how he taught the children about the Bible. As a rising young manager at a real estate development company, he was also trusted as a church deacon. Their relationship began with casual conversations during the after-service coffee hour. God brought us together, she thought at the time. At their wedding, the church choir sang beautiful hymns, and the pastor blessed their new beginning. The moment they exchanged vows as white rose petals danced in the air still shines in her heart. Their life afterward was as happy as Linda had imagined. Thomas's work was going well, and they enjoyed shopping at the Galleria and buying groceries at Whole Foods together. On holidays, they would stroll around 50th and France and enjoy brunch at their favorite cafe. They continued their church activities and spent fulfilling days within the community. Their last Christmas together. Thomas enthusiastically talked about a new real estate project in front of the fireplace. The Christmas tree lights softly illuminated his profile, and Linda felt truly happy. 2 weeks later, he suddenly went incommunicado while on a business trip to Las Vegas. Despite desperate search efforts, the police suggested accident was likely. Neighbors and church members helped with the search, but no clues were found. After 3 years, a death certificate was finally issued last year. During that time, what supported Linda was her unchanging daily routine and the power of faith. Linda sighed as she picked up her coffee cup. Outside the window, neighborhood children rode past on their bicycles. But I must keep moving forward, she thought. She had established herself as a freelance web designer and became more active in church activities than before. Supported by the warm community, she led a quiet but fulfilling life. She had made new friends at Wednesday Bible study, and the garden club was planning next spring's flower beds. The Sunday morning light sparkled on the kitchen table. Linda stood up and began preparing for service. She took out her favorite dress from the closet and paired it with a modest pearl necklace. A new day was about to begin. After returning home from service, Linda was preparing a light lunch in the kitchen as usual. While making a chicken and avocado salad, she was reflecting on today's sermon. The pastor had spoken about the meaning of trials. Just then, the doorbell rang. The clock showed 2 p.m. Visitors were rare on a quiet Sunday afternoon. The intercom monitor showed 2 middle-aged men in smart dark suits. Unfamiliar faces. After a moment's hesitation, Linda headed to the door. As she opened it, the older-looking man stepped forward. His neat appearance and composed manner immediately revealed his profession. Mrs. Linda Morrison. His solemn voice broke the afternoon quiet. Yes, that's me. I'm Michael Johnson from Johnson & Partners Law Firm. This is my colleague, David Watson. We have a matter to discuss with you. Linda felt her heart tighten for a moment. Law firm. The weight of those words stirred anxiety in her heart. Nothing could be read from the 2 lawyers' expressions. Linda took a deep breath and nodded slightly. Please, come in. The 3 seated themselves in the Tudor-style living room. Several memorial photos with Thomas hung on the wall above the fireplace. Michael Johnson took out documents from his leather briefcase. Mrs. Morrison, this is a very difficult matter to bring up. A moment's pause. Birds were chirping outside the window. You are being sued by Ms. Jessica Hamilton. Ms. Hamilton is claiming $1 million in damages, alleging you were her husband's mistress. The words rang like lines from an unreal movie. Time seemed to stop in Linda's mind. I'm sorry, but I don't understand what you mean. Attorney Johnson pulled out another document. Could you tell us about your relationship with Thomas Hamilton? At that moment, Linda's heart leaped. Thomas. That name shook her world. However, the composure she had cultivated through years of church activities supported her. She slowly stood up and walked to the bookshelf. Just a moment, please. She took out a photo album and opened the last page. There was a solemn certificate. Please look at this. She placed the death certificate before the two lawyers. And photos from last year's memorial service. Thomas Morrison. My husband. He passed away 2 years ago. Her voice was quiet but firm. The lawyer's expressions clearly changed. Attorney Johnson scanned the documents. He exchanged glances with his colleague. Clearly, this was an unexpected development. Mrs. Morrison, we deeply apologize. However, Ms. Hamilton also has considerable evidence. Linda's hands trembled slightly. What kind of evidence? Photos, emails, and a marriage certificate. Warning bells began ringing in Linda's mind. Marriage certificate. Yes. A marriage certificate issued in Las Vegas 2 years ago. Those words created a deep crack in Linda's heart. 2 years ago. Las Vegas. The place where her husband last made contact. Outside the window, dusk was approaching. Thomas's smile in the photo above the fireplace suddenly felt like that of a stranger. Our investigation shows that Thomas Hamilton is currently alive, you mean? Linda's voice was surprisingly calm. Faith had given her the strength to face trials. The lawyers exchanged glances again. The situation had completely changed. The story from their client differed greatly from the reality before them. We'll need to investigate this matter more thoroughly. Attorney Johnson chose his words carefully. Please refrain from contacting Ms. Hamilton for now. Linda nodded quietly. Various emotions were swirling inside her. Anger, sadness, and a strange sense of anticipation. After the lawyers left, Linda remained alone in the living room, staring at the photos above the fireplace illuminated by the setting sun. Thomas, are you really alive? That question was absorbed into the room's silence. However, in Linda's heart, a new determination was beginning to sprout. She needed to know the truth. Linda slowly began to pray for the long battle ahead. The streetlights of 50th and France were beginning to light up one by one in the autumn dusk. Inside the high-end boutique Elegance by Jessica, warm light still remained. Designer dresses in the show window caught the eyes of passers-by. Linda sighed deeply in front of the store. The address that Mrs. Carroll from the church women's group had found was correct. The owner of this sophisticated store was Jessica Hamilton. The brass bell on the door rang quietly. Staff were preparing to leave. "I'd like to see Jessica Hamilton." A dignified voice responded from behind the counter. "That's me. But we're closing." At that moment, Jessica's eyes caught Linda's figure. A moment of silence. "You." "I'm Linda Morrison." A freezing tension dominated the store. Jessica straightened her back and signaled to her staff. "Sarah, you can go home." After the young staff member left, the two women faced each other. Jessica was 37, exuding elegance in a black dress, though her gaze mixed anger and sadness. "You've got nerve coming here." "The woman who stole my husband." Linda responded in a calm voice. "That's not true. I'm the one who wants to know the truth." The boutique's luxurious interior gave a quiet weight to their conversation. Chandelier light made the showcase jewelry sparkle. "Truth? Do you think you have the right to talk about truth?" Jessica's voice trembled. "Please look at these." Linda took out the death certificate and wedding photos. "Thomas Morrison. My husband. Married 8 years ago, disappeared 3 years ago. Declared dead last year." Jessica's expression wavered slightly. "That's impossible. Thomas Hamilton is my husband. We married in Las Vegas 2 years ago." She also took out documents. A marriage certificate. Joint property deed. Photos of them together. "He's a successful businessman in real estate development. He invested in my store." At that moment, Jessica's voice trailed off. Her eyes were caught by a photo Linda showed. A church photo from 10 years ago. Thomas serving as a deacon. He was trusted as a deacon at Christ Presbyterian Church. Jessica's hands gripped the counter tightly. "No way. Your store is a successful boutique carrying luxury brands. But where did the startup funding come from?" "Thomas invested in it." Jessica's voice grew slightly weaker. "My husband was a real estate company sales manager. He didn't have enough assets to make such large investments." The women's eyes met. The same question floated in them. "We were both deceived by the same man." Jessica's voice trembled. Her anger was turning into deep sadness. Linda quietly approached and sat beside Jessica. The expensive leather chair creaked softly. "Would you tell me everything?" In the nighttime boutique, the two women's dialogue began. Jessica started telling her story. Growing up in a wealthy family, losing everything when her father's business failed. The struggle to climb up in the fashion industry on her own. And meeting him in Las Vegas 2 years ago. "I thought he was someone who understood my dreams." Wiping away tears, Jessica continued. "The dream of opening a luxury boutique. It needed substantial funding." Linda nodded quietly. "Thomas was always good at relating to people's dreams." They began checking records on the computer. Bank transactions. Real estate contracts. Various documents generated new questions. "This transfer record." Jessica pointed at the screen. Large transfers from a Las Vegas casino. But Thomas said he didn't gamble. Wait. Linda found an old newspaper article. A fraud case involving a VIP room dealer in Las Vegas 3 years ago. The article mentioned a young female dealer's name. Carol Smith. Age 28. This photo. Jessica gasped. The person with him is. In the blurry security camera footage, familiar male and young female figures. We need to investigate. Linda's voice was filled with determination. This might not just be about us. The clock already showed 9 p.m. Their shadows stretched long in the store lit by streetlights. Let's talk to the police. Jessica stood up. But before that, she turned to Linda. Tears glistened in her eyes. Let me apologize. Linda quietly shook her head. No apology needed. We're both victims, and now we're allies. The sound of locking the boutique echoed in the quiet night street. The two women walked together, shoulders close. I'll contact my lawyer tomorrow, Jessica said. And about this casino woman? Yes. But tonight. Linda pointed to Caribou Coffee across the street. Shall we talk? About us. For the first time, a small smile appeared on Jessica's lips. Thank you, Linda. In the distance, church bells rang 10 o'clock. A long journey still lay ahead for the two women. But they were no longer alone. They had found a trustworthy companion in their quest for truth. The blue ocean of Cancun, Mexico, sparkled outside the luxury resort hotel window. The December sunlight was as bright as midsummer. By the pool, tourists were enjoying their tropical vacation. In the hotel surveillance room, Linda and Jessica were absorbed in the security camera footage. FBI agent Sarah Johnson operated the monitor. This is footage from 3 days ago. The screen showed a man and woman relaxing on poolside lounge chairs. Thomas and the young woman, Carol Smith. As if nothing had happened. Linda's voice trembled slightly. 3 weeks ago, a joint investigation by Las Vegas police and the FBI had revealed the truth. Thomas's true identity was that of a skilled con artist. He had committed multiple fraudulent marriages with different women, each time perpetrating large-scale fraud. Carol Smith was his accomplice from the casino. The federal prosecutor is preparing charges for bigamy, insurance fraud, and investment fraud. Agent Sarah continued her explanation. But why Mexico? Jessica asked. They were laundering the illegal casino transfers here. The agent showed financial transaction records. Total amount, approximately $5 million. Linda closed her eyes. The sincere deacon she met at church. Her loving husband. Was it all perfect acting? The two women exchanged glances. Let's go. Linda nodded quietly. The FBI team moved quietly through the luxury resort hallway. Room 2507. The top floor suite where Thomas and Carol were staying. The special unit broke down the door and entered. Carol's scream was heard, and Thomas ran out to the balcony. He tried to move to the adjacent room's balcony but was secured by the waiting investigation team. Thomas. Linda's voice echoed quietly. He turned around slowly. The woman who had loved him for 8 years. And himself, who had continuously betrayed that trust. Linda. That voice no longer held its former warmth. Why? A simple question. But that single word contained 8 years of feelings. Thomas showed a bitter smile. You wouldn't understand. That life at church, it was suffocating. But you were a deacon. Acting. It was all part of the plan. If you play the role of a trusted person, no one doubts you. At that moment, the last hope in Linda's heart vanished. The man she had loved had never truly existed. God was never in your heart. Her voice was closer to pity than sadness. In the next room, Carol was also being arrested. In the hallway, hotel staff and guests were curiously watching the scene. The tropical sunlight turned the arrest into a surreal scene. In the interrogation room, Thomas began to tell everything. The first fraud was 10 years ago. He scammed investment money from a wealthy widow he met at church. That success derailed his life. He continued deceiving women and committing marriage fraud. His position as a church deacon served as a perfect shield of credibility. Meeting Carol in Las Vegas, he became involved in casino money laundering. But his greed knew no bounds. It was all to pay back debts. He continued his confession, covering his face with both hands. But once I started, I couldn't stop. Linda and Jessica were listening to that confession. It's over. Jessica whispered. Yes. But this is a new beginning. Linda answered quietly. Church bells rang in the evening Cancun streets. Linda stood on the hotel terrace. Are you okay? Jessica gently placed a hand on her shoulder. Linda smiled. Maybe this was God's guidance too. What do you mean? If this hadn't happened, I wouldn't have met you or known the truth. The two women stood facing the sunset. They looked like they were taking steps toward a new life. In the distance, waves could be heard. Truth can be cruel sometimes, but knowing it makes people stronger. And new bonds are formed. Let's go home. Linda said. Everyone at church is waiting. The tropical dusk gently embraced their new journey. At the Minnesota Federal District Court. Winter sunlight streamed into the solemn courtroom. I will now pronounce sentence on the defendant, Thomas Morrison. The judge's voice echoed through the silent courtroom. Linda closed her eyes quietly next to Jessica. 15 years imprisonment. 5 years probation. Full restitution of damages ordered. The gavel sound resonated through the courtroom. Thomas, in an orange prison uniform, hung his head. No trace remained of the neat businessman he once was. The defendant is given an opportunity to apologize to the victims. Thomas slowly stood up. All eyes in the courtroom focused on him. Linda, Jessica, and all those I hurt. His voice trembled slightly. I deeply regret my actions. I trampled on your trust, your love, and your lives. Linda opened her eyes quietly. The last words from the man she had spent 8 years with. Especially Linda. I exploited your pure faith. That may have been my greatest sin. The winter light in the courtroom caught Thomas's tears for a moment. My sins are beyond redemption now. I only hope that during my time in prison, I might have a chance to reform myself. His words trailed off. The guards led him away. That would be the last time Linda would see Thomas. Outside the courtroom, people from Christ Presbyterian Church were waiting. Mrs. Carroll gently embraced Linda. You did well. Church members warmly surrounded the two women. Among them were other victims of Thomas. New bonds had formed through the trial. Linda spoke quietly. Thank you all for your support. Jessica spoke up cheerfully. Let's talk about our new project. It was a plan to establish an NPO to support victims. An organization to support victims of fraud and psychological abuse. Based at the church, it would provide counseling and legal support. Trust and Hope. What a lovely name. Mrs. Carroll smiled. New hope for those who have lost trust. Linda's eyes were shining. That's what we learned from this trial. In the evening, snow began falling in Edina. The streetlights of 50th and France gently illuminated the snowflakes. Linda and Jessica were discussing future plans inside Elegance by Jessica. They would provide a corner of the boutique as a consultation space for the NPO. I want to direct my web design work more toward social contribution too. Linda said. I'd like to create an information site for victims. I wonder if I can do something through fashion too. Jessica pondered. Like employment support for domestic violence victims. Then, a young woman visited them. Carol Smith. She too had served her sentence and begun walking the path of rehabilitation. I really needed to see you both. Carol's voice trembled. I'm glad you came. Linda smiled kindly. I want to help somehow too. Determination showed in Carol's eyes. Using my Las Vegas experience to support people with gambling addiction. The three women talked about their new dreams by the snowy window. 1 year later. Sunday service at Christ Presbyterian Church. Linda stood at the pulpit and began speaking quietly. Trials sometimes make us stronger. And they nurture new bonds. Among the congregation were many friends met through trust and hope. Jessica watched warmly from the front row. We cannot change the past. But the future is in our hands. Next to the pulpit hung a photograph. 3 smiling faces taken on a snowy day at 50th and France, Linda, Jessica, and Carol. I learned the power of forgiveness. And it opened the door to a new life. Light streaming through the window transformed into beautiful rainbow colors through the stained glass. God never gives us trials beyond what we can bear. The words she once heard from the pastor now resonated with deep meaning. After the service, Trust and Hope's monthly meeting was held in the church community room. With new participants increasing, their activities were steadily expanding. But this is just the beginning, Jessica said, sipping her coffee. Yes, there's more ahead. Linda gazed out the window. The chirping of birds announcing spring's arrival could be heard in Edina. Life is strange, Carol whispered softly. To find my true self in this way. The three women watched the irises beginning to bloom in the church garden. The start of a new season. It was also a symbol of their new lives. Well, Linda stood up. Tomorrow is our volunteer day at the prison. They regularly helped with rehabilitation programs at the prison where Thomas was held. He's changing little by little too, Jessica said. Yes. This too is God's guidance. There was no longer any sadness in Linda's voice. Church bells rang in the garden. The story of women who overcame past pain and found new hope continues on. Tomorrow will be another good day. The three women nodded gently at Linda's words. Outside the window, spring's sunlight warmly embraced the streets of Edina. On a spring morning, soft sunlight streamed through the windows as a baby's cries echoed through the kitchen of the Wilson residence in the upscale neighborhood of Greenwich, Connecticut. Their two-story white mansion stood as one of the most beautiful homes in the area. There, Michael. Here's your delicious milk, Linda Wilson cooed, cradling her 6-month-old son in one arm while checking the milk's temperature with her other hand. Her fingers, accustomed to precise measurements in the laboratory, carefully gauged the perfect temperature for her baby. Her shoulder-length brown hair, which gave her an intellectual appearance, fell neatly despite the morning rush. The modern, predominantly white kitchen was already set for breakfast. The inviting morning air was filled with the aroma of toasted bread, the vibrant colors of fresh fruit, and the scent of freshly brewed coffee. What time do you think you'll be home today? Linda casually asked her husband Brian, who was reading the newspaper at the counter. Dressed in an expensive suit, Brian lifted his coffee cup to his lips before answering. His well-groomed appearance and short blonde hair exuded the air of a successful young businessman. Probably around 9. We've got a big project deadline coming up. Late again. Linda sighed softly. Michael will be asleep by then. In her arms, the baby had contentedly closed his eyes. His chubby cheeks moved slightly as he breathed peacefully. He wore a light blue onesie, a designer brand chosen by Patricia. At 8 a.m., Linda was walking through the neighborhood, pushing the stroller. New buds were beginning to sprout on the trees, announcing spring's arrival. In her sophisticated black and white dress that reflected her intellectual style, she was quite unique in this neighborhood. While balancing her role as a senior researcher at a major pharmaceutical company with motherhood wasn't easy, she cherished these morning moments. Sunlight filtering through the street trees illuminated the meticulously maintained lawns. The mansions lining both sides of the street showcased refined architectural designs. Good morning, Linda. Neighboring housewives called out to her one after another. In their jogging attire, their gazes held a subtle hint of discomfort toward Linda, who worked outside the home. Career mothers were a minority in this affluent suburban neighborhood. Still, she took pride in her choices. At 2 p.m., the doorbell rang. Behind the solid wooden door stood their regular visitor. "Hello, Linda." Patricia's gentle voice resonated. With her neatly styled gray hair and wearing casual but luxury brand clothing, she came for her twice-weekly childcare support. Her demeanor reflected her 30-year career as a head nurse. "Oh my, isn't Michael dressed too lightly? Won't he be cold?" As soon as she entered, Patricia began checking her grandson's clothing. Her gaze held a sharpness that missed nothing. "It's fine. I've checked the room temperature. In my experience, this time of year requires warmer clothing." Linda swallowed her words. Her mother-in-law, with 30 years of experience as a head nurse, couldn't help but point out even the smallest details. Her words often contained subtle criticism of the new mother. That night, Linda confronted Brian in their bedroom. Her husband, changed into silk pajamas, listened to his wife's words with visible fatigue. "Don't you think your mother's been a bit too involved lately?" Linda chose her words carefully. "Mom's just worried. She has lots of experience." Brian's response was always the same. His voice carried a slight irritation at having his mother's dependency pointed out. Linda let the matter drop. There was no point in trying to convince her husband, who always took his mother's side. Late at night, Linda sat at her desk and opened her diary. Her hand trembled slightly as she held the pen. In the quiet of her study, her anxieties began to take shape. Is she really thinking about Michael's best interests? In Linda's mind, her vague concerns were gradually taking on more concrete form. One Saturday morning, Linda was sterilizing a newly purchased high-end baby bottle. She had spent weeks researching to select this product, made with medical-grade materials and best suited for baby's health. Suddenly, Patricia's voice rang out behind her. "Oh dear, this bottle won't do at all." As usual, her mother-in-law had arrived unannounced. Dressed in an elegant navy dress, Patricia had already disabled the security code and entered the house. "This is a top-brand product with medical-grade materials." As Linda began to explain, Patricia waved her hand dismissively. "The ones I used were safer. Brian grew up healthy using them." Speaking thus, Patricia swiftly cleared away the expensive bottle and took out an old-fashioned one she had brought. Anger swelled in Linda's chest, but her expression remained calm. The self-control she had cultivated as a researcher kept her emotions in check. "Mother, our parenting approach. Oh dear, there's no single right way to raise children. But experience matters." Behind Patricia's smile lurked a slightly triumphant expression. Weekend plans also crumbled under Patricia's sudden visits. The family zoo trip that Linda and Brian had planned was cancelled with one comment from the mother-in-law: "It's too cold this time of year." Instead, they adopted Patricia's suggestion for indoor activities. No one could oppose the atmosphere created by her "since I'm here already" attitude. In the evening, Linda observed her mother-in-law while preparing dinner in the kitchen. Patricia was preparing Michael's baby food in the living room as if she were the lady of the house. "This is much too early." Patricia frowned at the baby food menu Linda had prepared. But the pediatrician said, "This is how we did it with Brian." A mother's intuition is important too. Linda felt the sharp sting of the implied criticism: "You lack a mother's intuition." Her expertise as a medical researcher meant nothing here. Everything was invalidated in the face of Patricia's experience. Social media made things worse. One day, Linda received a message from a friend. Patricia had been posting numerous photos of Michael. "I asked you to be mindful about posting baby pictures." That night, when alone with Brian, Linda brought it up quietly. "Mom just wants to show off her grandson's growth." Brian's words were tinged with exhaustion. "You're being too sensitive." "Mom is." Mom, mom, always mom. Linda's emotions finally reached their limit. "This is about our family. Why does your mother's opinion always come first?" "Mom is thinking about what's best for us." Brian's words now sounded like mere excuses. A few days later, Brian came home unusually early, and they had plans for dinner together. Michael was to be left with a trusted babysitter. "It's been so long since we've had time alone." Linda's heart swelled with anticipation. However, 30 minutes before their departure, Patricia appeared, claiming an urgent matter. "Oh, eating out is such a waste. I'll make you my special dinner." Saying this, Patricia headed to the kitchen with shopping bags. "Mom's cooking is the best." Brian's face lit up with joy. Linda stood frozen. Her husband happily accepted his mother's suggestion and was already calling to cancel their restaurant reservation. They were instantly swept up in her mother-in-law's pace. That night, Linda secluded herself in her study. Important research project documents lay spread before her. She slumped over her desk with a deep sigh. For the next week, she needed to work on weekends to analyze crucial clinical trial data. During that time, she would have to entrust Michael's care to Patricia. "Is this really okay?" Her questioning voice echoed emptily in the dark study. The next day, Linda returned home early from the research facility. The crucial data analysis had progressed better than expected, allowing her to finish 2 hours ahead of schedule. As spring sunshine brightly lit the streets, her car moved through the quiet lanes of the upscale neighborhood. "Michael will be so happy." Murmuring this, she glanced at the small blue paper bag on the passenger seat. Inside was a new toy she had chosen for her son, an educational toy designed based on developmental psychology, purchased despite Patricia's objections. As she parked in front of the house, she sensed something was different. No one was in the garden. Usually at this time, Patricia would have Michael in the stroller, giving him a sun bath. On her way to the entrance, Linda stopped. The welcome mat was slightly askew. Patricia, being such a perfectionist, would always straighten it. Shoes were carelessly discarded. "I'm home." Linda's voice was absorbed into the unnaturally quiet house. A chilling anxiety enveloped her entire body. "Mother? Michael?" No response. When she opened the living room door, Linda's heart nearly stopped. On the expensive beige sofa lay Michael, completely limp. His face was pale, with faint breathing sounds escaping from his slightly parted lips. His body was cold, and his pupils were abnormally constricted. Patricia sat slumped beside the sofa. Her luxury brand dress was wrinkled, and her usually perfectly styled hair was disheveled. "He was fine until just a moment ago." Patricia's voice sounded hollow, as if coming from far away. Her expression mixed confusion with something else. "What happened?" Linda's cry tore through the silence. "I don't know either." Patricia avoided eye contact. Her hands trembled slightly. Linda took out her smartphone and dialed emergency services without hesitation. 6-month-old male, semi-conscious, weak breathing, decreased body temperature. "Please send an ambulance immediately." Linda's voice had regained its composure. She proceeded to check Michael's pulse and breathing, beginning necessary first aid. Throughout this, Patricia remained sitting in the same spot. The composure of her former head nurse persona was nowhere to be seen. Soon, sirens approached. Paramedics quickly entered the room. The stretcher wheels squeaked against the luxury marble floor. Medical equipment was efficiently attached to Michael's tiny body. The regular beeping of monitors broke the eerie silence. "Please explain the situation in detail." A paramedic questioned Linda. "I found him in this condition when I returned from work." Linda quickly explained the situation. Her eyes never left Michael. "Did you give the child any medication?" This time the question was directed at Patricia, who only shook her head. The ambulance transport began. In the cramped space of the vehicle, Linda held Michael's tiny hand. Patricia had insisted on riding along, but faced with Linda's icy stare, she ended up following in a separate car. Greenwich General Hospital Pediatric Emergency. Radio contact was made with the hospital. The sirens blared again as the ambulance sped through the spring afternoon streets. After arriving at the hospital, Michael was immediately taken to the emergency treatment room. Doctors and nurses in white coats entered the treatment room one after another. "Dr. Thompson will be here shortly." Linda nodded slightly at the nurse's words. Dr. Thompson was known as one of the top pediatricians in the area. 15 minutes later, Dr. Thompson emerged from the treatment room with blood test results. His expression carried an unmistakable severity. "We need to call the police." The doctor's voice echoed through the emergency room hallway. "What? What do you mean?" Linda's voice trembled. "Sleeping medication was detected in your child's blood." Those words hung heavily in the air, mixed with the scent of hospital disinfectant. At that moment, Patricia appeared at the far end of the hallway. As she heard the doctor's words, the color drained from her face. Then, in the next instant, she turned on her heel and ran. "Stop her." At Dr. Thompson's command, security guards quickly moved into action. The figure of the mother-in-law in her white coat disappeared down the long hospital corridor. In the Greenwich police station interrogation room, Detective Morris sat across from Patricia Wilson. The detective's deep brown eyes held the keen observational skills of a veteran police officer. "Please tell me again, in detail, about today's events." Detective Morris's voice was intentionally kept soft. Patricia remained elegantly dressed, but her posture lacked its usual dignity. Her luxury brand dress was wrinkled, and her hands trembled slightly. "I went to Linda's house at 10 a.m. as usual." Patricia's voice was hoarse. "And then I took care of Michael during his nap time." Her words trailed off. "Please tell me the specific times and actions." The detective's voice grew slightly firmer. Meanwhile, in the hospital waiting room, Linda was responding to police questioning. Though her voice maintained its composure, her fingertips wouldn't stop trembling. Patricia helped with childcare twice a week regularly. Linda's explanation was clear and logical. Had there been any recent changes? Yes, her interference had been increasing. Linda explained the events in chronological order. Police investigation discovered powdered sleeping medication among Patricia's belongings. At the bottom of her luxury brand handbag, white tablets had been finely crushed and placed in a small plastic bag. More decisive evidence was found on the hospital's security cameras. 3 days earlier, footage showed Patricia purchasing something at the hospital pharmacy. Later, she was captured crushing tablets in a secluded area behind the building. This was a premeditated crime. Detective Morris muttered while examining the evidence. Analysis of Patricia's mobile phone revealed even more shocking facts. Her memo app contained detailed plans. Little by little, so as not to raise suspicion. Each recorded word told the story of her twisted planning. Back in the interrogation room, Detective Morris laid out these pieces of evidence before Patricia. The elderly suspect completely broke down at the sight. "She was trying to take my son away from me." Patricia's voice trembled softly. "So you drugged the baby?" The detective's voice contained barely suppressed anger. "Little by little, she was trying to destroy the family, if I could prove that Linda couldn't take care of Michael while working." The confession continued with twisted logic. Meanwhile, at the hospital, new facts had come to light. Detailed examination of Michael's past blood tests revealed multiple instances of small amounts of sleeping medication. However, the quantities had been so minimal that they had gone unnoticed until now. By nightfall, Brian had rushed to the hospital. His face was pale. "How's Michael?" His voice trembled with anxiety. "Don't worry. He's recovering well with proper treatment." Brian let out a deep sigh at Dr. Thompson's words. However, his relief didn't last long. When the police informed him of the case details, Brian's expression froze. "Mother, did this?" He was at a loss for words in the face of this unbelievable reality. In the hospital hallway, Brian faced his mother. Patricia was accompanied by police officers, in handcuffs. Her appearance bore no trace of her former dignity as head nurse. "Brian." "No. It was for you." Patricia tried to approach her son. "I'm cutting ties with you, Mother. You tried to kill my son." Brian's voice was surprisingly calm. "It was for your happiness. Goodbye. This is the last time." Brian turned his back and walked toward the hospital room. His demeanor suggested he would never look back. In the court's emergency office, Prosecutor Jennifer Clark explained the case overview. The defendant administered sleeping medication to her 6-month-old grandson multiple times. "We plan to charge her with attempted murder and child abuse." Patricia sat small beside her lawyer. Her former arrogant attitude was gone, reduced to just an elderly woman who had committed a crime. New facts emerged about Patricia's past. During her 30-year career as head nurse, there had been several reports of problematic behavior. Her excessive need for control and perfectionist personality had been noted before. "Why did you feel the need to go this far?" To Detective Morris's question, Patricia answered after a long silence. "My life was only the hospital and family. Brian was my pride, his wife, with her career, stealing my son." Her distorted maternal instincts had driven her to this point. The next morning, the incident was reported in local media. The headline, "Former Head Nurse's Shocking Attempted Murder of Grandson," shook this wealthy suburban town. The prosecution built up Patricia's charges in detail. Premeditation, repetition, abuse of professional knowledge. There was little room for leniency. Brian and Linda discussed their future life while watching over Michael's recovery. "Mother needs to pay for what she did." Brian's voice carried determination. "Yes, but let's look forward, for Michael's sake." Linda gently held her husband's hand. Outside the window, spring rain began to fall quietly. It seemed to herald the beginning of a new chapter for this family. 1 year later, a peaceful spring had returned to Greenwich. Cherry blossoms were in full bloom in the Wilson family's garden. Under the dappled sunlight, 18-month-old Michael played, his adorable voice ringing out. "Michael, careful over there." Linda's voice echoed gently. Her expression now held a calm confidence that hadn't been there before. After the incident, she began receiving invitations to speak about balancing work and motherhood. From this experience, she started a support group for working mothers, which garnered much sympathy and support. "Mama." Linda smiled at Michael's voice. The terror of that day had certainly left deep scars on her heart. However, those scars now made her stronger. Brian had changed significantly too. Once solely focused on work, he now treasured time with his family. He spent every weekend with them, watching Michael grow together. "Shall we go to the zoo today?" On a holiday morning, Brian suggested while holding Michael. He who once prioritized his mother's opinions above all else now created family time of his own volition. Meanwhile, Patricia's life in prison took an unexpected turn. Sentenced to 8 years in prison, she gradually changed during her incarceration. In the prison's rehabilitation program, Patricia received psychological counseling. through this process, she began confronting the root of her controlling nature. My love had become mixed with a need to control. Patricia spoke quietly in the counseling room. With her increased gray hair, she showed no trace of her former arrogance. In prison, she began helping with other inmates' health care. Her work was sincere, earning trust from many staff members. Your experience can surely help others. Patricia nodded slightly at her counselor's words. Then one day, a letter arrived for Linda. It was Patricia's first letter. Dear Linda, it took me a very long time to write this letter. The letter detailed her distorted love and deep regret for the irreparable mistake it had caused. I know that I can never fully atone for the harm I've caused Michael and your family, even if I spent my entire life trying. All I can do now is face my mistakes and try to change myself for the better, even if just a little. Linda held the letter in her hands for a while. What will you do? Brian gently asked. I think I'll write back. Brian nodded silently at Linda's decision. Her reply was brief. It will take time for me to forgive you. But I want to believe in your change. That night, Linda opened her diary in her study. Outside the window, spring breeze was scattering cherry blossom petals. Today, I read Patricia's first letter. The hatred and anger haven't disappeared yet. But strangely, my heart feels a little lighter. Michael grows every day, and our family bonds are deepening. This experience has taught us many things. Perhaps there's no such thing as a perfect family. But if we have the heart to care for and try to understand each other, we can move forward, even if just a little at a time. We'll surely face various obstacles ahead. But I'm not afraid anymore. I believe this family can overcome any difficulty. Soft breathing sounds could be heard from Michael's bedroom. Linda closed her diary and headed to her son's room. She gently stroked Michael's cheek as he slept in his bed. The spring moonlight softly illuminated his peaceful sleeping face. Good night, Michael. Those words carried endless love and certain hope for the future. A new seasonal wind gently rustled the street trees' leaves. It seemed to announce the beginning of a new chapter for this family. By the prison window, Patricia too looked up at the same moon. In her hand, she held a draft of her next letter. Atoning for my sins and being of use to others. That is the mission for my remaining life. The clock hands moved quietly, announcing the beginning of a new day. In their respective places, in their respective ways, life was surely moving forward. In the spring night sky, the full moon shone quietly. The Beacon Hill district of Boston was wrapped in morning mist. Charles Street, lined with historic red brick buildings, was still sparsely populated. The antique street lamps cast a faint light as maple trees swayed in the early winter breeze. Have a good day, Nathan. Margaret Collins smiled as she adjusted her 6-year-old son's school uniform collar at the doorstep. With her well-kept black hair and intelligent gaze, the hairstylist's hands overflowed with love for her son. Bye, Mom. Do your best at work today. Nathan responded cheerfully before trotting off toward the school bus, his backpack bouncing lightly against his back. As Maggie waved to Nathan looking back at her, she felt a warmth spreading in her chest. The days she had worked so hard as a single mother flashed through her mind like a kaleidoscope. Studying cosmetology at Newbury College while working as a late-night waitress, the joy when she finally landed a job at an upscale salon. Above all, Nathan's smile had always been the cure for all her exhaustion. "Good morning, Maggie." A gentle voice came from behind as Robert placed his hand on her shoulder. Their meeting 2 years ago happened when he was the manager of the men's department at the upscale department store, Harrison's. "Nathan's full of energy today too." Rob's voice carried the affection of a real father. Since their marriage, he had treated Nathan as if he were his own son. On holidays, he taught him baseball at Boston Common and sometimes helped with homework. Whenever Maggie saw this, she couldn't help but feel grateful to God. However, not everything was ideal. "Well, I can't believe you brought that child." The words from her first meeting with her mother-in-law Elizabeth still echoed in her ears. The coldness in her haughty gaze at the historic mansion in Louisburg Square. A Wellesley College graduate, she had built a career of over 20 years as the general manager of the women's department at Harrison's and was a well-known figure who appeared on television advocating working mother support. "I want to support all mothers." The words of her mother-in-law on television were worlds apart from the reality of who she was. Robert's sister Jennifer's wedding was approaching. Engaged to a luxury brand buyer, she had a kind personality and maintained good relations with Maggie's family, but under her mother's influence, she had gradually begun to distance herself. Rumors of a new project called Little Angels were spreading at the department store. It was said to be a major investment venture involving multiple famous brands for a new line of luxury children's wear. Her mother-in-law's attitude, consumed with preparations for this, grew colder by the day. Maggie sighed as she boarded the subway heading to the salon. One holiday afternoon, while walking in the garden, Maggie recalled what had happened at the family meeting a week ago. "Let's discuss the wedding preparations." In the drawing room of her mother-in-law's home in Louisburg Square. In the space surrounded by antique furniture, her mother-in-law sat straight-backed, elegantly wearing an expensive Hermes scarf around her neck. "This should be decided by our family." The intention behind those words was clear. Nathan was not included in family. Maggie felt her chest tighten at her mother-in-law's subtle way of excluding her son. "Nathan, don't touch the furniture without permission." Turning around, she saw her son approaching with keen interest toward an 18th-century Chippendale-style chair. Betty's words were sweet as honey, yet cold as ice. "But Nathan is also a member of the family." Rob interjected quietly, but Betty's expression froze instantly. "Robert, you still don't understand. This is a traditional Wilson family event." Since that day, the conflict had deepened day by day. Harrison's department store towered in the Prudential Center. The interior was already decorated lavishly in anticipation of the Christmas season. "This is a lovely item." Betty Wilson was handling a new coat from a French luxury brand on the children's floor at the top level. Upon spotting Maggie and Nathan by chance, her eyes narrowed. But it wouldn't suit that child. This elegance is meant for children raised in appropriate households. The casually thrown words went unnoticed by Nathan himself. However, the glances of nearby customers were momentarily cast toward Maggie. That night, after putting Nathan to bed, Maggie confided in her husband. "Rob, I might be at my limit. Mother has always been like this. It takes time to get used to, but this isn't about getting used to it." Before Nathan gets hurt. Tears glistened in Maggie's eyes as her words trailed off. A few days later, at a tea party at the Boston Ladies Club, Betty was elegantly enjoying afternoon tea with close friends. "Would you show us pictures of your grandson?" When asked this, Betty took out her smartphone and began showing photos from Jenny's engagement party. Nathan was nowhere to be seen in them. "I don't have any pictures of that child." Betty added sugar to her tea with a meaningful expression. "Well, he is a stepchild after all. It's different from real family." Those words also reached the ears of a waitress who happened to be passing by. The young woman's expression clouded, though Betty didn't notice. "Could you tell us about the challenges working mothers face?" During a television interview recording, Betty Wilson responded with perfect makeup and a smile. "I want to support all mothers. Whether they're single mothers or in subsequent marriages, they should be given equal opportunities. That's my belief." While the studio staff nodded impressively, only one person, an assistant director watching the program in the makeup room, felt something was off. She had previously worked at Harrison's department store. "About the Christmas presents." Rob faced his mother in the department store office. "Ah, you mean Jenny's present. I've already chosen it." "No, I mean Nathan's present." Betty's expression stiffened for a moment. "For that child, you two can just. There hasn't been any present from you to Nathan last year or the year before. Robert, you understand our position, don't you? Besides, Jenny's wedding preparations are important right now. Don't think about unnecessary things." Rob started to say something but ended up just nodding silently. The wedding preparations steadily progressed. Meetings at luxury hotels, sending out invitations, selecting menus. However, Maggie and Nathan were thoroughly excluded from this process. One day, Jenny sent the schedule for family photos. "Jenny, this schedule conflicts with Nathan's after-school activities." "I'm sorry, Maggie." "But Mother." Jenny's voice trembled on the other end of the line. After hanging up, Maggie gazed out the window. The Beacon Hill streetscape was beautiful as always. Yet somehow, the scenery felt strangely cold. At night, after Nathan had finished his homework. "Mom, why can't we go to Grandma's house?" At this innocent question, Maggie found herself at a loss for words. "Hey, Mom. Did I do something wrong?" In that moment, something changed decisively within Maggie. The anxiety reflected in her son's clear eyes was something she could not ignore. "Nathan, you haven't done anything wrong. Mom will always protect you." As she hugged her son's small back, Maggie strengthened her resolve. On the wedding day, in the early morning when no one else was awake, Maggie was carefully ironing her son's uniform. "Mom, today is a special day, isn't it?" Turning to the voice behind her, she saw Nathan, still in his pajamas, staring at a suit he rarely wore. "Yes, it's Jenny's important day." As she spoke these words, Maggie felt something heavy in her chest. The message that arrived late last night from Jenny was still on her smartphone screen. "I'm sorry, Maggie. I don't understand what Mother is thinking either." The Four Seasons Grand Ballroom, which served as the wedding venue, was already enveloped in an elegant atmosphere. Crystal chandeliers sparkled in the winter sunlight, and the white and gold decorations lent an air of refinement to the entire room. "Oh, this is wonderful." Betty greeted arriving guests with a perfect smile. Dressed in a Chanel tweed suit, she was every inch the society lady. The guest list was a microcosm of Boston society. Wellesley College alumni, Boston Ladies Club members, and Harrison's department store executives. There were even famous international designers involved in the Little Angels project. Particularly eye-catching among them was Jean-Pierre Durand, the creative director of the French heritage brand Maison Lumière. His children's clothing line was the most talked about in the industry. "Betty, this wedding looks like it will be a wonderful beginning." Boston society ladies kept approaching Betty. Each time, she nodded gracefully. In the preparation room, what Maggie saw was a small waiter's uniform. A pristine white shirt with a black vest, complete with a bow tie. "Ah, it seems the change of clothes is ready." Betty gracefully opened the door to the preparation room. In her hand was a small paper bag. "Mother, what is this?" "Miss Maggie, isn't it natural for your child to work? Surely you haven't forgotten your single mother days." Her voice was sweet as honey, but contained poison. "All the other children are attending in lovely dresses and tuxedos. Why just Nathan? If you want to be treated as a family member, you need to show your worth, don't you?" Betty stated this as if it were obvious. At that moment, Nathan entered the preparation room. "Mom, is this my clothes?" At this innocent question, Maggie was lost for words. "Yes, Nathan. I have a very important job to ask of you today." Betty spoke in a tone as if bestowing a special opportunity. "If you want to be recognized as real family, this much is natural, isn't it?" These words were whispered into Maggie's ear, out of Nathan's hearing. 1 hour into the wedding, the grand ballroom was wrapped in the distinctive glamorous atmosphere of high society. As champagne flowed freely and a live orchestra played, Nathan moved around in his small server's uniform, carrying trays of hors d'oeuvres. "My goodness, that child, they're making him work as a waiter." Whispered voices gradually grew louder. "There's no value in treating him as family," Betty said coldly to nearby friends, laughing. Her voice was deliberately adjusted to reach those around her. Nathan didn't understand the meaning behind the adults' glances or the weight of their words. He was just trying his best to fulfill the task he'd been given. His pure demeanor created an atmosphere that was rather heart-wrenching. Would you like some of these? The tray offered with a small voice. The invited guests who looked at it had mixed expressions of sympathy and confusion. And then, that moment arrived. Jean-Pierre Durand suddenly stood up. The atmosphere in the venue froze instantly. That child is. His French-accented English resonated through the silent venue. He's the model our brand has chosen. Those words dropped like a bomb in the room. The color drained from Betty Wilson's face. What did you say? The Little Angels advertising model audition. The final selection just finished last week. That child won the grand prize. The venue erupted in murmurs. We have already sent the contract. As the new face of Harrison's department store. The champagne glass fell from Betty's hand. The sound of breaking glass was like the sound of her world crumbling. A heavy silence hung over the Four Seasons Hotel's grand ballroom. The scattered champagne glass fragments on the floor cast an ominous gleam in the spotlight. What is the meaning of this? The voice of Richard Harrison, CEO of Harrison's department store, cut through the frozen air. Betty, let's hear your explanation. Jean-Pierre Durand was still standing. His gaze mixed with anger and disappointment. I didn't know. Betty's voice trembled. Her perfect makeup was beginning to crumble. Didn't know? Durand laughed coldly. You are the general manager of the women's department. The person in charge of the Little Angels project and the one with final decision authority for model auditions. An image was suddenly projected onto the venue's screen. It was the scoring sheet from last week's audition. Betty Wilson's signature was clearly there. Nathan Collins, age 6. Passed with the highest score. Richard Harrison said while reviewing the documents. In other words, you knew. You knew your grandson was selected as a model. At that moment, somewhere in the venue, a smartphone camera shutter sounded. The next morning's newspaper. The front page of the Boston Globe featured a photo of Nathan in his small waiter's uniform. Champion of working mother support makes own grandson work as server. The shocking double standard of Harrison's department store executive. On social media, the photos spread instantly, and Harrison's department store's stock price began to plummet. Richard Harrison's office was on the top floor of the Prudential Tower. In front of the large window overlooking Boston, he wore a stern expression. Betty, I understand your position. However, this incident cannot be overlooked. There may be impacts on our contract with Maison Lumière. You've destroyed 20 years of trust in just one day. At home in the living room, Maggie was watching her husband's expression. I've made my decision. Rob's voice had a firmness that hadn't been heard in a while. Mother's actions are unforgivable. Nathan, you were wonderful. Nathan, who had been reading a book on the sofa, looked up at his father's gentle voice. From now on, we'll cherish our family. That's my duty as a father. At that moment, the doorbell rang. Jenny stood there with red eyes and bowed deeply. I'm truly sorry. In her hand was a notice announcing the postponement of the wedding. A week later, at Harrison's department store's board meeting, Betty Wilson's dismissal was decided. Meanwhile, at a small clothing shop in the Boston suburbs, Betty was organizing inventory in the back room. Her former haughty expression was gone, replaced by deep lines of fatigue. Harrison's department store's Little Angels advertisement was displayed on a large street vision screen. Nathan's innocent smile cast a warm light on the winter streets. It was a small but certain symbol of hope, showing a new form of family. 1 year later in winter, Boston was welcoming another Christmas season. At Harrison's department store in the Prudential Center, long lines of shoppers formed from early morning. New collection of Little Angels on sale today. Under the large sign, Nathan's smile shone bright. In the year since that incident, he had truly grown as the face of the brand. Entering the department store, the security guard bowed politely. Maggie was now a special presence in this place. "Mom, we need to hurry." In the elevator, Nathan spoke with a slightly hurried manner. He had grown taller, and his expression was beginning to show hints of maturity. "Now, let us begin the announcement of the Working Family Support Program." Rob Wilson's voice echoed through the press conference room. He was now an executive officer at Harrison's department store, dedicating his efforts to building a new corporate culture. For the past year, we have carefully considered what true family support means. As camera flashes went off, the screen displayed photos of various families. Single mothers, step-families, dual-income households. And we have decided to launch a new program. At that moment, the venue doors opened, and Maggie entered. "This is Margaret Collins, who will serve as the director of the new program." Warm applause erupted from the venue. "Maggie, it was a wonderful press conference." During lunch, Jenny visited for the first time in a while. After postponing her wedding, she had started a new life in New York with her fiancé. "Thank you, Jenny. I went to see Mother." Jenny's voice clouded slightly. "She seems to have changed a bit lately." In a small clothing shop in the Boston suburbs, Betty Wilson still works as an unpaid trainee. Moving from selling luxury brands to a store handling used clothes and casual wear, she had for the first time come into contact with ordinary people's lives. The other day, a single mother came shopping. Mother used her own bonus to buy her clothes as a gift. Maggie smiled quietly. That night, at the illumination lighting ceremony in the public garden, "We'd like to introduce a special guest among our audience." The host's voice echoed in the cold night sky. "Ms. Margaret Collins, who has devoted herself to launching the Working Family Support Program." As Maggie stood on stage bathed in spotlight, she took a deep breath. "We have learned many things over this past year." In the audience, there were familiar faces. Former members of the Boston Ladies Club. Now, there was no contempt in their eyes. Every family takes a different form. But what's important is the bond of hearts. That's something nobody can take away. Suddenly, small arms reached from behind and wrapped around Maggie's waist. "Mom, that was a wonderful speech." Turning around, she found Nathan beaming with a bright smile. Beside him stood Rob, wearing a proud expression. A few days later, at the suburban clothing shop. "Ms. Wilson, there's a letter for you from a customer." When she opened the envelope the store manager handed her, there was a photograph inside. It showed Maggie, Rob, and Nathan smiling with the public garden illuminations in the background. On the back, in small writing, was a message. To Grandma. "Will you come to our Christmas party?" Tears quietly fell from Betty Wilson's eyes. Outside the window, snow had begun to fall gently. Christmas carols played from street speakers. Nathan's smile shone on Harrison's department store's Little Angels billboard. It was a small but certain sign of hope, telling of new family bonds being surely nurtured. Spring was about to return to the streets of Beacon Hill once again.